Welcome to the Happiness Contribution Show with me, your happy host, Rosaria Cirillo. On the show, we talk about the various roles happiness plays in our individual lives and in business, and about the benefits that being happy brings. And we share knowledge and practices about what contributes to our happiness. Join me and my guests on this happiness journey together and get involved by visiting our website at happinesscontribution.com. Welcome to the Happiness Contribution Show. I'm your host, Rosaria Cirillo, a little Italian, ball of sunshine, energy, enthusiasm, and passion. I am a certified customer experience and happiness trainer, advisor, speaker, and author with a mission to bring more happiness into the world, one interaction at a time, the business world being really my chosen playground. And I help conscious leaders make happiness their company's competitive advantage with advisory, speaking, and training focus on improving customer and employee experiences. And I help, hopefully, with this podcast too. And in today's episode, I want to share with you about International Day of Happiness, which was on March 20, the World Happiness Report, which also just came out, my definition of happiness, the 3 types of happiness and related aspects, and finally, why happiness contribution, which is also the topic and the name of this podcast. Ready to go? So first, we said March 20 is UN International Day of Happiness. It's really a day where, with all the challenges that we are seeing, really well-being matters more now than ever. And this day has become really an annual celebration of happiness as a fundamental human right and a goal for all humanity. Every year there is a theme. This year theme is Happiness for All and Ukraine, given the current situation. And the idea was really first introduced to the United Nations by the advisor Jamie Illan back in 2011. The idea was actually agreed and accepted, the proposal accepted in July 2012 when International Day of Happiness became official, but the very first occasion in which it was celebrated is actually in 2013. So next year will be 10 years. And really this celebration acknowledges how important and desirable happiness is for people everywhere, and how essential it is to incorporate it into public policy. And in my vision, in my hope, there is that sooner rather than later it will also come visible and a common vision how important it is also to incorporate happiness into not only public policy but also private policy, so into our organizations, into our companies, into the way that we provide education at schools and for our kids. And this day is now celebrated and hosted by various organizations. There are a lot of conferences happening around the day. One of those is WHASO, World Happiness Summit, which was started in 2017, and I had the pleasure to be there back then. I then was planning to go again in 2020, but that was really like when hell broke loose, and in fact I can still remember my entire week until March that year, because I was supposed to fly to US on the 12th of March. But anyway, this year, every year during International Day of Happiness is also the moment when the World Happiness Report gets published for the occasion. This year was the 10th anniversary of the report, and this report uses global survey data to report how people evaluate their own lives in over now 150 countries worldwide. I still have to, it's over 150 pages, so I still have to read the entire report for this year. But one critical message this year is that actually through the pandemic, we not only felt all the pain and the suffering, but one thing that really changed was the increase in social support and benevolence. Basically, through those dark and difficult times, we got closer together, which is an amazing news. And The report is based on a wide variety of data, but the principal source has always been the Gallup World Poll. So it basically looks at how people that are interviewed look at their life satisfaction. So it's really also subjective life evaluations, and that becomes the basis for the annual happiness ranking between all the different nations, which has really become what is going really viral in those weeks, because it's pretty common that we see in the top 5 the Nordic countries like Finland, Sweden, Denmark, followed then by Netherlands and Switzerland. They tend to be almost always in the first 5 points, and then the rest of the countries. So in the show notes, I will also share a link to a beautiful infographics when you can really see all of the different levels across all the companies. And the readership of this report has been growing very much. So it has reached now 9 million in 2021. But what is most important is that this report really brings 3 key messages. First, that the true measure of progress is actually the happiness of people. It tells us that happiness can actually be measured, and that we know really a lot now about what contributes to happiness. So given this knowledge, it really becomes possible for policymakers to make people's happiness the goal of their policies, and for each of us to live a wiser, happier life. And above all, it becomes possible for conscious leaders and corporate executives to make people's happiness part of their company's goals, knowing that happy customers are the most profitable one, and happy employees are the one with the highest return on investment, because they get less sick, they are more creative, they just bring on more innovations, there is much more cohesion in the team, so many reasons. So really happiness matters to the bottom line and can really be a competitive advantage. But then the question is, what is happiness? So my definition of happiness has always been inspired by Gandhi's quote. Gandhi defines happiness as when what we think, what we say, and what we do are in harmony, to which I've added 2 elements, feelings and experience, coming to the definition that happiness is when what we think, what we say, what we do, what we feel, and what we experience are in harmony. And I can talk more about those 2 elements, but today I really want to focus on what does this really mean in practice. So bridging from psychology, neuroscience to all the research that I've done, and also from my own personal experiences, we come to the conclusion that there are really 3 types of happiness when we look at happiness. And I don't look at happiness in a fluffy way or even sometimes toxic positivity way. I really look at happiness from a science point of view, looking at all the studies that have been done, and even back to the Greek philosophy, because I have a classic background. I did study Greek and Latin at high school, so it's one of my biggest passion. So if we look at what are the 3 types of happiness, we identify really 3 types. First, we have hedonic happiness, then we have eudaimonic happiness, and finally we have mature happiness. So what are those? Hedonic happiness is really about pleasure, and it's about the pleasant life. That's just about the pleasure in one single moment. It can be having a great drink, it can be having fun. So it's when I look at the aspects of hedonic happiness, I look at it as the feelings that we feel with our 5 senses, and also the result of our dose of chemicals, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphin. So in a more physical way, and also more if you transitory, like futile. It's just 1 moment of hedonic happiness, and it's fleeting. Then we have eudaimonic happiness. This is really already more about the flourishing life. So it's really about the happiness that we can cultivate. In this area of happiness, we look at happiness as an emotion, which is triggered as a response to our needs, and whether our needs are met, exceeded, or they stay unmet. This is for me the happiness that we can nurture by taking care of those needs, by filling up what I call the 9 petals of the sunflowers of happiness, by filling up our pollen tank. And those 9 elements of happiness that we also identified in yellow goldfish, which are health, autonomy, purpose, play, integrity, nature, empathy, simplicity, and smile. And it is also in this case happiness as well-being, as a neural pathway, like a brain muscle that with neuroplasticity we can really train and develop and keep active through continuous practice of what contributes to our happiness. This is, for example, taking care of what Tal Ben-Shahar defines our spire whole being, with the 5 elements that constitute well-being, which are the spiritual, physical, intellectual, relational, and emotional well-being. And finally, we have mature happiness, something that, like the Greeks have been saying already forever, but that in the field of the positive psychology has really only started to be studied in the last few years by Paul Wong. And this is the part that is characterized by inner harmony, acceptance, gratitude, contentment. It's about having peace with oneself, others, and the world. It's very much also the concept of the more Eastern philosophy like Buddhism. So this is really about an attitude and a way of living. And that really brings us then to the final element that I want to cover with you in this podcast, which is, why am I talking about happiness contribution? And I really start talking first about happiness contribution in 2016. When reflecting on the pitfalls of Net Promoter Score, I really started to think about a new way that we could use to measure organizations' impact on people's life that would really make visible if and how much we were contributing to happiness. I was really wondering what could we say instead of asking employees, let's increase our Net Promoter Score, which to some extent felt really meaningless. I was wondering, what if there would be a much more meaningful score objective? What if we could say to our employees, let's improve our happiness contribution? And that is really when I started to think about happiness contribution and happiness contribution factor. In my TEDx talk in May 2016 about happiness-driven growth, I share my wish that by 2021, companies, organizations, universities, municipalities, and even country would compete for the yearly highest happiness contribution award. Well, 2021 was last year and I didn't quite get yet to see this dream become true, but we are slowly getting there. And so that is when in 2021, when I realized, okay, the highest happiness contribution awards isn't happening yet, but what can I do while the world catches up? And that is when the idea of the happiness contribution show as a podcast was born. That is where I can start to create the seed. I can start to widen the learning sharing, and I can start to really see this message so that it can reach more and more people. In 2017, I had already started to collect systematically more examples of how companies were contributed to happiness, which is when I partnered with Stan Phelps to write Yellow Goldfish. Stan and I defined Yellow Goldfish as every time a business does a little extra that contributes to the happiness of its customers, employees, community, and society. And that's where we identified the 9 paths or yellow factor that we can follow both to contribute to our own happiness and to increase happiness in businesses to delight the customers, drive growth, productivity, and prosperity. And the main reason why also with Stan we start talking then about contributing or contribution, and it became really a key word, were really 3. We had 3 reasons. First, we said happier is a better goal than happy, which is really something that I learned from Tal Ben-Shahar. He really says it's almost pointless to ask the questions, am I happy? Because it's really a closed question which has only a binary answer, either yes or not. So you're either happy or you're not happy. But that's not how we function. As human beings, we are much more complex than that. And even when we are having a bad moment, it doesn't mean per se that we have to be really unhappy. So the better questions to ask, Tal suggests, is how can I become happier? So what contributes to my happiness? The second reason is that really happiness is unlimited. We can make more of it. And actually, the more we create happiness and we share it with others, the more happiness for everyone. In his book Happier, Tal Ben-Shahar shares the research done by Kennon Sheldon and his peers, where looking at the goals and happiness and the relationship between the two, they really concluded that the pursuit of goals involving growth, connection, and contribution can actually lead to greater well-being than goals involving money, beauty, and popularity. And also in the book 10 Keys to Happier Living, Vanessa King Great Dream Framework, it starts with a G, which is about giving, because research proves that there is a virtuous circle in the science of giving. The more we give, the happier we are. And finally, the third reason is that even when there is suffering, we can always bring the light and contribute just with our presence by sharing our light. So this is really where also in Yellow Goldfish and in the second publishing of Yellow Goldfish, which I renamed Yellow Factor, I added an extra chapter focused purely on the metaphor of the sunflower, which we had already chosen with Stan as representation of the what, because each petal represents an element of the happiness, and of the how, because of each stage of growth represented by sunflower. But the inspiration of the sunflower has also three additional elements. So the first one is sunflower growth, but we also have the elements of seeds and the elements of sun. So if we look at the elements of the growth, the sunflower has very similar elements to the one that we identified for the goldfish. So we have seen that the quality of water, the size of the bowl, the number of fishes in the bowl, the first 90 days, and the DNA of the goldfish are what make the difference to the growth of the goldfish. Those are the same that influence the sunflower growth and blossoming. The quality of the ground, the size of the pot or the field, the number of other seeds, the first 60 days of life, and the genetic makeup of the seed. And all of those correlate with the elements that influence the company growth: the market, the economy, the competition, the startup phase, differentiation. But over the last few years, and especially during the COVID pandemic, I've really seen the pandemic has really proved that the lack of health, which is really the first yellow factor, impacts the total economy. And I've come to believe that happiness is that one element which actually allows us to influence all of the 5 factors, ultimately contributing to the quality of the ground, therefore the economy, transforming competition in collaboration, increasing the size of the economy, and creating a better startups, and ultimately even improving the differentiation and our own genetic makeup. If we look at the seeds, when we look at the sunflower, the seeds are not only a key element of the own growth of the sunflower, but once the flower has reached its full blossoming, already contributing to happiness for everyone that actually looks at the sunflower blossoming, but their seeds, they actually take on a life of their own, with dozens of possible uses, from food for us, but also for the birds and for all sorts of things. And they really contribute ultimately to many other species' growth and happiness. And finally, there is the element of the sun. The sunflowers get energy through photosynthesis. The bud, which is the first flower head in the first 35 to 65 days after seeding, really tries to get all of the hours of sunlight, therefore turning until you can see the sun. But once it has developed to a certain stage, it stops following the sun to keep all of its energy to focus on its growth. But basically, the idea of following the sun is that really following that sun, it's what creates the basis for the sunflower to nourish itself, converting the sun energy into chemicals that then make the entire plant much bigger. So this is also how for each and every of us, simply being the light to others, bring the light to others by offering hope, encouragement, kindness, or compassion, even in times of darkness, or in times when others are struggling, by offering a way to help, to see the good and the beautiful, or just help them regain their glow and shine. So we can always be of some support and contribute. So that is really, and sometimes it can even just be about offering a smile. So those are the elements why also contribution became so key. And the message behind it is that at the end, even when companies choose other ways than happiness to differentiate themselves, every company and each of us can still have a yellow factor and do their little extra that seeds happiness, shines sunlights, and contributes to a happier, healthier, more peaceful world. And similarly, when we are faced with sufferings like the loss of a dear one, a pandemic, or right now, like a dramatic situation like a war, where really talking about happiness seems off, or is surely more challenging to pursue, each of us can still make a small contribution to someone else's happiness. All the help that is being provided to the refugees, or simple things like finding the trolleys at the stations where they arrive for the children, those are all little items that cannot take away the drama of the war, but they can definitely contribute a bit more to that small happiness that they can have in a situation like running away. Ultimately, happiness comes from within. It's our own journey, and I've come to accept in the past years there is suffering in life. We cannot avoid that. Yet, we can always, in any situation, really contribute to a little bit more happiness. And that is why I talk about happiness contribution and not just about happiness. And this is why with this podcast, I really want to explore knowledge and practices that each of us knows or has developed to contribute to our happiness, inwards as individual, at individual level, and outwards for our inner circle, like the close family, friends, or colleague, but also for our wider outer circle, like our clients, our partners, our employees, the general community. And it is why the question that I want to explore with you all on this journey is, how can we contribute more to our happiness and to the happiness of others? And by doing so, drive peace, prosperity, while profits can follow for everyone as well. And that brings me also to pose the question for you, and especially to ask you, what does happiness contribution mean to you? Share your definition with us in the comments on YouTube, or at least in Spotify. You can also share it. I'll have the question in Spotify, and just join us on this learning journey together. I'm committed to bringing more happiness into the world by empowering conscious leaders and companies to achieve growth, productivity, and profits by cultivating happiness. So do get in touch to find out how I can help you and your team with keynotes, training, advisory service, or playing fantastic games, about which I'll tell you more in the next episodes. That was all for today. And tune in for the next episodes and share this one with at least one person. It would really mean a lot to me. Thank you all!